Ooh, that's nice. So, but I spent 13 years at Omniture and then Adobe. So I've been in the analytics and ad tech and measurement and data space for years. Recently, I've become data privacy curious. I don't have any of the really awesome letters after my name on my LinkedIn profile. I'm still working on getting all those certifications. I'm hoping several of you here do have that deeper interest. We've got one of the cooler sessions of the entire event here because this is our opportunity to kind of do an Ask Me Anything. I've got a list of questions in case you guys just get really dry on me or you fall asleep after lunch. But this is your opportunity to dive in deeper. We heard on the main stage this morning a panel that talked about privacy, data privacy from a high level. And we knew that people here are going to be coming from all different realms, from an analytics background, marketing, certainly some privacy professionals, IT professionals. So we wanted to set the stage on the big stage. This is for you that really want to dig into privacy. And so as you have questions, we've got some experts up here that have been doing this for a long time and really know this space well. I can ask all the questions. We're ready to talk about anything. In fact, we started doing a jam session, just throwing stuff out, and we went for 45 minutes, an hour, and could have gone for 2 or 3 more. But this is your opportunity to ask anything, okay? So with that, is this ever just lost cause? We'll figure it out. If it ever does, let me know. Switch it over. But I want to introduce our panel. So I'll start on the far end. Elizabeth Sexton from Adobe. Because I don't have my slide up, I don't remember your former title. What's your title on your LinkedIn profile, business card?
So my official Adobe title is Principal Product Manager, and I am the subject matter expert for privacy and regulated industries for the Digital Experience Business Unit.
And that's all on the business card?
That's all on the business card.
Okay. But when you were describing to me what you actually do and all the different pieces, because Adobe's a big business.
It is.
And you're on the product side of that business. Functionally, what does that mean you're responsible for?
Yeah, I think privacy continues to evolve. And I think if you are in the privacy space and you said, I want to go out and get in the privacy space, the job title looks different at every single organization right now. That's something that I see evolving over the next 5 years. But right now, I am a product manager. So my responsibilities are twofold, really, at this point. I oversee the overall privacy framework for the entire Digital Experience Business Unit. And I also have products, which are privacy products, which we deliver to enterprises for them to be able to honor their privacy obligations to consumers. So my side of the business is, although we have this cool Photoshop and Illustrator and all of that, that is not my side of the business. We do enterprise marketing and advertising capabilities. And so it's my customer who interacts with the consumer directly, but I'm responsible to provide tools for them to be able to do so, for them to be able to honor what the consumer wants. And so I operate as a traditional product manager, but I also oversee all the privacy and regulated industry frameworks.
That's a lot. And especially when I think about how vastly different a lot of those products within the Adobe portfolio are. You're talking about Adobe Analytics and data collection. You're talking about Marketo and Campaign, where you have a lot of PII that you now have to think about as well. You've got the data platform, which people can dump really anything into that. That's a big job.
It is a big job. And it's a fun job, and it's challenging. I mean, every day is a different adventure. Pick your own adventure every day. It really kind of depends on what's going on. And when you add in the privacy landscape that literally changes every day, it gives a lot of opportunity to meet new people, to be able to manage new initiatives, and to make sure that we're doing what's right for the consumer. Even though we're not a B2C business per se, our tools are. And so first and foremost, my responsibility is to make sure that our tools will support consumer rights and consumer expectations.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the panel today. And finally, we have Amy Lewis. Amy, you are from Berkeley Research Group, BRG, so it's easier for me to say. Tell us what you do over there.
So yeah, it's BRG because people kept thinking we were a think tank, and we are not. So we officially shortened the name to BRG to be even more vague. So we're a consulting company that does a bit of everything, but I'm on the data privacy and data compliance and data governance group. I've been at BRG for about 8 years and been doing data privacy pretty exclusively for about 7 of those. So from the day GDPR got passed, we said we need to add this into our portfolio. And so we are not a law firm, but the spot that we like to sit in for our clients is working with their in-house or outside counsel and sort of providing best practices of what we see across clients and in the industry, translating legal advice to the operations teams. So when the legal team says, ask for consent where we need it. Okay, what should the consent say? Where should it be? Where should we track it? Where should we store it? You know, what do we do if somebody tells us they don't want us to do that anymore? So really operationalizing it. That also involves a lot of translating tech back to lawyer speak, because there is a massive language gap there. But we really provide the full suite of services from companies who say, what's data privacy? And we come in and, you know, assess what's their data, where is it, why do you have it, and build up from the ground up to, you know, improving operations, say that, you know, they feel like a couple of data subject requests. So those are when somebody asks, like, show me what you know about me, or delete my data. When someone makes a request like that, feel like some slipped through the cracks. Can you help us improve that? Data breach response, you know, something goes wrong and we need to, you know, we can't make the assessment of, yes, you need to notify under this law, but if you do, we can help you mine the data of what was breached to determine, so the legal team can determine, does it meet the thresholds? And then we can help ghostwrite all of those notifications with you and help guide you through the process of restoration as well. So a little bit of everything. And lastly, we do DPO as a service. So that's outsourced DPO for those of you subject to DPO requirements in Europe, Singapore, wherever around the world. We can serve as your outsourced DPO, which is extremely helpful, as I think it's the Netherlands keeps issuing new guidance on DPOs and saying, like, internal audit is not independent enough. And you can't, and we're like, okay, who is independent internal to the organization if not internal audit? So having someone external can help just get rid of that question.
So you're not a lawyer, you just play one on TV.
Yes, kind of like a doctor on TV. Don't ask me to actually give you CPR, but I can sort of, you know, make it look right.
Well, I've been credibly informed that we're supposed to say as the disclaimer that none of this is actual legal advice and you should all talk to your in-house counsel.
Yeah.
With that out of the way, JD, you got your hand up. What's going on, buddy?
I should know this. DPO.
Yes, data protection officer. So some laws like the GDPR, Singapore's law, probably a few others that are slipping my mind right now. So if you meet certain thresholds, you have to register somebody to represent the company to the regulator. So they're the main point of contact, and under the GDPR, in a sense, they kind of act as the regulator's internal watchdog. So you are supposed to act on behalf of the individual, not on behalf of the company in that particular role.
They like them to be European and not American.
They like that, and then we say, show me where in the law it says that, and they go, oh. We had that with the Netherlands recently, and they were like, okay, fine.
I think it's that they just don't like Americans. So I've learned that anywhere you go in the world, you should learn one phrase, and that is, I am Canadian. And then they're okay with it. It works well. This is exactly what we're talking about. Ask me anything. If you guys have questions, we want you to put your hands up. Now, I actually heard a few people when he said DPO, you said data protection officer.
I'm using the European
I heard
word.
some people whisper data privacy officer. It's actually a question we get a lot. Rez, I'll start with you. When you think about the difference between data privacy and data protection, is there a distinction there? Especially considering I know a lot of people talk about data privacy and security almost synonymously. Cousins, twins, or is there a notable distinction there? Awesome. And Elizabeth, I know we've talked about that. We probably spent a half an hour when you came over for lunch at our offices. Privacy, security, how should people be thinking about that as an overall data protection framework?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rez. They're cousins. You can't really have one without having the other. And the way I typically position it when I'm educating internal teams is to say data privacy and privacy in general deals a lot with what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to use the data? What's going to happen with the data? How would it be transformed? Whereas data security is more about how are you going to secure the data? How are you going to keep it safe? How are you going to keep it with high integrity? Make sure that it doesn't turn into something it's not supposed to. And so they have to go together, and both of them go together in order to protect the personal data of consumers.
Awesome. Now, because you name dropped Heather, I believe according to Republican National Debate Standards, she has the right to respond for 30 seconds. No, what I want to do is give you a chance to rib her a little bit. We all heard the opening session this morning. I want to know, as professionals yourself, you were obviously sitting there and you're thinking, wow, they really blew it on that. As you heard what was happening this morning, is there anything that stuck out that was just spot on that you're like, yes, I'm glad they're saying this because it's important for people to understand this? And was there anything that you thought, actually, I have a different perspective on this? Was your hand up coming up? Yeah. Well, apparently there was supposed to be a flock, but it couldn't fly. So we're moving on to back to 2005 when it's just what pages you're on and what's that content look like. Amy, I mean, you talk to a lot of customers. The benefit of being a consultant is that you're not focused on one brand, many. We talked in the opening session about the definition of data privacy and what type of data we're talking about to begin with. Anything stick out to you that you wanted to re-emphasize, or anything that maybe you have your own perspective on?
Yeah. So I think you guys got it spot on. I don't have anything that I would contradict in the opening session.
I'm really hoping for a fight here.
I know. Heather, come on. No, just kidding. I think the one thing that we see an issue with, just because a lot of the companies that we're working with, they're strapped for cash. They don't have the budget, or they're allocating it somewhere besides privacy and security. And so absolutely having scanning tools and having, automated data subject request tools are fantastic, and they ease the burden so much. But sometimes they come with six-figure prices, and that is a very tough pill to swallow. And so one of the challenges can be, how do you meet your obligations to a level that your company is comfortable with the remaining risk without spending, half of your year's budget on a tool you're going to use 20 times? And that comes down to, how often are you getting these requests? If you are a B2B business, you're probably not getting them very often. So investing in a massively expensive tool, probably not a great use of budget. But if you are an e-commerce platform, oh boy, you better automate that, or else you're never going to get out of that hole. And then also, what's your risk profile for the company? And, having a risk methodology that's formalized, that's more common at highly regulated industry companies like pharmaceuticals and healthcare, banking, all those. But if you are lucky enough to be at a company with a risk methodology where you say, this is our financial threshold for high risk, and this is our financial threshold for mid risk, and this is our reputational threshold for high risk, and you can map all of these out, that way you can more reasonably say, we can attach a price tag to this risk, or we can attach a true reputational risk or a true customer loss risk to this that can help justify some of these costs. If it's, if there's a 50% chance you're going to spend $2 million in fines, or between fines, negative reputation, and customer return and all of that, $100,000 tool might be worth it. But again, that's all depends on what your company looks like and your industry and what your back end, how far along you are today.
Elizabeth?
From the session this morning, I think one point that Heather touched on that doesn't get enough time and attention is the different data classifications. And this is something that's incredibly important, something that I'm super passionate about, because I actually spent 20 years in healthcare before I came to tech. And data that looks relatively innocuous in one sense is not always innocuous when combined with other data in other settings. And so that name and address looks pretty innocuous, could be gathered from public records, but when combined with the fact that you've visited a medical facility, can become sensitive and has to be treated differently. And those are pieces that we have to keep top of mind. I think Heather's example of the Facebook collection, or Google, or anyone else who wants to add pixels to your page, presents you the opportunity to evaluate, is that good for my consumer, which was hit on this morning. And it's incredibly important to remember, this is you, this is your kid, this is your grandma. Like when we have engineers and developers who make suggestions, I'm like, would you agree to this if it were your child? Would you agree to this if it were your elderly mother? And if the answer is no, then we shouldn't be doing it and we shouldn't be collecting it. The part of that, I think that it behooves us all in this time is really to take a step back and say, what are we collecting? I think we have a pattern of collecting data for data's sake, just like, hey, it's big data, let's collect it, let's compile it, like someday it'll be useful. The piece we didn't hit on this morning that we probably need to talk about is, what's your plan? What's your strategy? Are you collecting it and then just gonna let the chips fall where they may? Or do you have a plan, a strategy? What are you using that data for? Just to pick on Heather, if Heather were to come to me and say, why do you need my date of birth? Why do you need my SSN? Why do you need my home address and a secondary contact person? You should be able to answer those questions. And at the time you make that plan, you should be able to say, what class of data is that? And what are my guardrails around those classes of data, which we didn't get into this morning.
So when I hear people talk about data minimization, is that what they're talking about? Is actually saying only if I really absolutely need it? Is there more to be thinking about that when we think about privacy by design?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take in privacy by design. There's also, I mean, data minimization is one pillar of your overall privacy strategy. And data minimization is that whole, like, I like to call it the cradle to grave. Like, from the point you take that data in through its entire life cycle, how are you going to manage that data? What's the purpose for maintaining the data? And at what point are you going to permanently, not put it in the wastebasket, but permanently remove it from your system?
Light it on fire. It's done.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a hard concept when we've had decades of big data collection. Let's collect the data and hope that we use it later, or maybe we'll mine it later and it'll be useful. But I would just ask everyone, when was the last time you looked at the purchase records of the last 5 years to make predictions about your marketing behavior for this Christmas? Like, the reality is that data from 2 years ago is probably not useful because consumers change buying habits. And so there's those considerations that need to be made. And part of your strategy should be data minimization. At what point do you no longer need the data? At what point did you tell the consumer, this is what I'll do with your data? Because if you look under GDPR, it's essentially you're keeping the data for as long as is needed to perform the service or function for which you intended to provide the consumer before you got rid of it. So if they bought a one-time hoodie, do you still need their data 24 months later?
Nice. Let's see if this works. Oh, it works. So Rez had actually mentioned that things are changing every day, every week, every month. Just here in the United States, we've got now 12 laws, state-level laws passed. 4 are already in place: California, Virginia, Colorado, and Connecticut. Our wonderful state of Utah here, we go live in December, but we got another 7 up to bat starting 2024 and beyond. This is, in fact, I have to check this map every day and start counting them just to make sure I still remember who's on the list, who's up to bat. I think there's 4 more that are in consideration. So this changes all the time. Rez, when you think about running not just a US-based business, but truly a global business, and having worked in all those global markets, as these things change every day, every week, and every single jurisdiction seems to want to have their own little spin and own little take on what those regulations look like, how do you and your team go about putting together a formal practice around addressing this and adjusting to it? Yeah, they're getting all they can from you guys. Yeah, sure. Amy, we've talked about this visual specifically. 12 laws in place, 4 more coming. Are we going to have 50 states that are all going to have 50 different laws? Do we have a chance at a national level law here in the U.S.?
I mean, I really hope that the federal government gets their act together and does something. I don't hold out a realistic hope that that's in the next year or 2, at least. But I hope it doesn't turn out like the data breach reporting laws before all this, where we had 50 states and 125 laws. like, great. They all disagree. But yeah, luckily, I won't say that they're all copy pasting from each other, but these are tending to look very similar. So it's not really in your best interest, unless you have some very specific use case, to try to carve out like Arizona. I'm not going to do Arizona because Arizona doesn't have a law. Find the commonalities across these laws. And also, if you're global, find the commonalities across these and GDPR and Singapore's law and Japan's law and China's new law and India's new law. Find the commonalities and try to apply those everywhere. And that doesn't mean apply the exact same rule, but be able to set up your system so that you can provide an access request if asked, no matter where the person is. And then you can say, well, no, we're not going to do it there, or, we're only going to check this little bit for, Bahrain. I don't know what their law looks like. We will in a second. But at least the capability is there so that you can be adaptable when they inevitably come out with a new law that now covers Arizona and says the exact same thing everyone else says. So
is it? I've heard it say that we're never going to get a federal law because there are people on the left coast, pretty much California. Let's talk about California. California has the strictest set of laws in the U.S. right now, and they were one of the first. I'm going to get challenged.
Yeah.
Ooh.
They're,
Okay, Oregon's not live yet. My home state of Oregon. We'll figure
Chris
that one out
wants
later.
it to be Utah.
Okay, in general though, but you have people in a subset of a small number of states that say, unless the federal law is at least as strict as mine, why would we lower our standards to agree with everybody else? And you can actually see some of these dark gray states, they've had laws come up for a vote and voted them down. They're like, no, we're good. We're okay with status quo. And so you've got people polling from both sides saying, we're never going to agree. I mean, it goes to the whole concept of federalism. It's not just America, it's the United States of America. But I guess my question is, should you just be going to not the lowest common denominator, but the strictest? Just go find the strictest law, whether that's Oregon, California, GDPR, if it's applicable to me. And as long as I'm good there, I'm good everywhere? Or should I be thinking about it differently than that?
So I know I said I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to give the lawyer answer of it depends. And so I think that comes down to a cost-benefit analysis based on your company and your company's data. And so if you were to apply these really strict rights and these really strict rules to everybody, what are you losing as a company? Are you losing valuable data that you're actually gaining, valuable, tangibly valuable insights out of? Are you, putting extra strain on your systems and your people that you don't have to put on there? And then what is the risk that in 5 years, everyone's not going to just say, well, don't do it that way anyway. So you should have built your system anyway. But the benefit of providing providing the highest, strictest rules would be, the reputation, like you were talking about earlier. We value your privacy. There's a reason that Apple, massive company, fantastic marketing department, is marketing privacy. People want it. They wouldn't market it if they didn't think that message was going to attract people to buy their products, especially against Google. And so it really comes down to what data do you have? What are you using it for? What tangible business value are you getting out of it? And what would be the cost if you gave it up?
Now, you actually provided us with the next visual, all of this data.
Yeah.
Yeah, the U.S. is interesting and it's fragmented, but a lot of us are working with global brands, global partners. We're running large programs that span jurisdictions, and all of these are different. You've simply broken this down simply by what states are what nations are opt-in by default versus those that are opt-out by default. And it's pretty fragmented. What are you seeing as you talk to global brands and how they're adjusting and building a program when it looks like this?
Yeah. So this was about a month ago. One of our clients who's an e-commerce platform, their marketing team was pushing back really hard and saying, we don't want a cookie banner. We don't want a cookie banner. Europe's the only one that cares about it. Doesn't matter. And the legal team was on the very opposite side and said, regulators might come down after us. We're a recognizable name. We can't do it wrong. I want you to be as strict as possible in your interpretation. Go check all of the databases and tell me what's opt-in and what either is opt-out or they don't regulate it. We had no idea it looked like this. We thought it would be, some Latin America, some Asia, and obviously Europe would be opt-in. And we got that almost 2/3 of the countries or jurisdictions in the world are opt-in and 86% of the world population is covered by a law that is opt-in, depending on your interpretation, if you're going really strict. So if you want to play it safe, this is what your cookie consent rules could look like. Or, depending on what your data is and your value out of it, you might just say, I don't want to deal with that headache of customizing it. Everyone's opt-in.
And the vast majority of this, from what I understand, is just within the last 3 to 5 years. So this is all net new. A lot of that yellow that we're seeing is we're adjusting on the fly.
Right. It used to be huge news when somebody made a GDPR clone law, and these days it doesn't even come to the headlines. Everyone has a GDPR clone law. All of the Middle East seems to be cloning the GDPR. Who knew? Yeah.
Okay. Now, Elizabeth, you've talked to me about consent specifically, and that's ultimately what we're talking about when we talk about opting in or opting out. When you think about consent, I think you put it in terms of previously consumers were just on the bus. They were passengers getting taken wherever the brands wanted to take their data, and now they're co-pilots. What does that look like, and how do you think about that, not only running and working with a global brand, but also building technologies that millions or thousands of other global brands are also using for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, in general, consent, for years it was, well, we're doing consent because it's required by GDPR. The reality is that consumers have signaled, there's no mistake that these laws are popping up because there's consumer pressure. It is not exactly like everyone's like, hey, you know what I'd love to do for the next legislative session? I'd love to come up with some really cool new privacy law. That's just not where we're at. It's because their constituents have said, I'm tired of this. I opened the news and there's a student data breach that occurred in May that was reported over the weekend. And so, data breach laws or data breaches have propelled consumers to say, what is going on? And why is my data on the dark web and all of these sort of things? And so what you're seeing is this push by consumers, and consumers are actually saying, and this has been happening in Europe for quite some time, but it's hitting North America. And that is consumers are saying, hey, wait a minute, I want to be a co-owner, or I want to own, or this is my data. And so no longer are they willing to have marketers take them on a ride. They want for you to build a relationship with them, one that they can trust, one that they feel like they can be loyal to your brand because you told them what you were going to collect. That's all you collected. And you said what you were going to do with their data, and that's all you did with their data. So being able to be that clear is part of your strategy and also part of your privacy values. Consumers are looking for what's your organizational values around data privacy? And being able to articulate that and have consumers say, wait, those values marry up with my values, I trust that brand. Creating that trusted relationship, just like you would if you were in this room and shaking hands with everyone in the room and trying to get to know people, that's what consumers are demanding that we change. They're demanding to be heard. They're demanding for you to honor what they ask for.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and I've heard you say it many times, it's not just the big stick. I think many of us here are worried about getting hit with the big stick of a fine, whether that's over in Europe, or as the new laws evolve here in North America. A lot of the reason we do what we do in data privacy, especially across our websites, is we don't want to be the next Sephora. Now, there's only been one Sephora, but also, didn't Sephora only get fined $1.2 million? I'm no accountant. I have a degree in finance. I'm assuming $1.2 million doesn't matter to Sephora nearly as much as the trust you just mentioned. Is that the right way to be thinking about it?
Exactly, because we're still talking about Sephora. Sephora is in almost every privacy PowerPoint presentation I have seen for U.S. privacy law in the last 6 months. Like, the reality is that they broke their consumers' trust. And the consumer says, I want my data back, and I'm going to go shop somewhere else. So consumers are voting with their wallet. And so we often see this. So I own part of our product portfolio that supports data subject rights requests for customers. All of you, brands around the world, the brands that send us and say, delete Elizabeth Sexton because she made a legitimate data subject rights request. We see this ebb and flow. The minute there's a data breach, I will see the uptick of requests. The minute Boxing Day in Canada happens, I'm going to get a bunch of requests to delete data. The fact that Christmas happens, you can be guaranteed the first 2 weeks of January, my product team is going to be super busy making sure that we have scaled to allow for the automation to work across all of our products in the Experience Cloud suite.
Awesome. And Rez, you've already hit on this. Let's hit it on it one more time, because the word I have written in big, bold letters that you've been talking to me about is trust. For a brand like yours that relies, you're not just dealing with selling people stuff or providing a service, you're dealing with people's money and their life savings and their investments. How does trust play into the way you think about your function in data privacy? Don't do it because you can, only do what you should be doing. I mean, you seem to have a follow-up you wanted to jump on.
Yeah, so when you were talking about governments forcing you to turn over your data that you've collected potentially legitimately, I don't know if anyone knows sort of the history of privacy in Europe and why Europe seems to be the leader on all of this. Quick, not so fun history lesson. Very sadly, one of the reasons the Germans were so efficient in the Holocaust is the Germans kept great records. And then the government went crazy and told everyone to turn over their records, from their pharmacist, from their doctor, who said, oh, I just want to know my patients better. Who's your grandma? Your grandma's Jewish? Great. Come on. And so after the war and after the regime change, obviously, Germany was one of the first to put in a privacy law that says, if you don't need it, you can't collect it. Not because we don't think you would use it well, but what if the government went crazy again and this data existed and now the law has changed and you have to tell me that. So that really is the start of their mental framework of, if you don't need it, stay out of my life. Do not collect it, even if you would use it for great purposes like getting to know your clients better. The data shouldn't exist if it's not needed. So that is why Europe seems to be leading this charge, is after Snowden's reveal, and it's like, oh, it's not our government, but the government's doing it again. They're collecting stuff that they shouldn't have, and they upgraded their privacy directive to the GDPR and give it extraterritorial teeth, and here we are.
I actually really like that you called out the extraterritorial part as well, because I think far too often we have, many of you are our customers that are saying, I need a test for privacy. And for example, I know that I am under the auspice of the California law. So give me a proxy so I can see what it looks like if I'm coming to your website from California. And it doesn't matter if they're coming from California, if they're a California resident, if they're a European data subject, if they're in New York or Australia or anywhere in the world, you still have to follow that, which I think is surprising to some people. When you're talking to customers, how do you get them to think more globally and holistically rather than, okay, I'm going to fit to this law in this country and that's it?
Yeah, that's where we, it depends. So if you're not explicitly offering goods or services to, say, Europe, technically you fall outside of the GDPR. Most companies just go ahead and say, fine, put a cookie banner up. It's fine. This is where it helps that all of these laws are based on the same 8 principles that came out in the 70s or 80s. So if you meet, that's where purpose limitation and data minimization and accountability and all of those same principles, they're the same. So if you get your hands around that and what data you have and why, you're better set up to navigate all the changing regulations and everything. And I think I strayed from your question.
No, that was a great answer to this. I can keep going. I've only seen one hand up. What else do you want to know? All of you obviously decided that it was worth your after lunch hour to come and sit and listen to us talk here in the lovely lounge. Especially you folks on the couch. You've had it easy. You're comfortable. You don't have to deal with the high chairs. Arthur, go ahead.
All right. Something we discussed a lot internally was the resident thing. Like, how the hell are we going to know what the user's residence is when they visit our website? We know their geolocation based off an IP address. But the guy that travels from Germany to visit his cousin in New York is going to get a different cookie treatment. You'd stay in Germany. He's still going to be able to say, hey, you're wrong. I'm a German resident. I didn't give me the right cookie banner.
I think with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think with that, you're also subject to the laws of where you are at the time. So, yeah. And also, that's just a risk-based decision. So is it worth your time and effort to, put in place some crazy technology I'm not sure even exists to try to figure out where somebody's residency is, which is even more privacy invasive? Or if that is the one crazy guy who raises an actual complaint, you investigate and go, I am so sorry. I will, if there is any cookie data that we pulled into our systems that aren't the website, we'll go ahead and get rid of that. And be sure to turn off, your cookie banner consent next time and clear your cookies so we don't accidentally get anything more. Thank you for being a customer.
If his name is Max Schrems, you're in trouble.
Yes, that is
Start
the
there.
one crazy guy.
And he's got a whole list. He's got a hit list that he's published. So if you're on that list, know about it. Rez, anything else to add to that about how to deal with that type of extraterritoriality? Elizabeth, anything to add on that front? And I'm actually thinking about the folks that you guys partner with at Adobe. Obviously, there's a big privacy landscape of technologies and tools. I heard from a number of our customers that are using Adobe Launch to integrate with OneTrust or TrustArc or other CMPs. When you talk about consent banners and the way to make sure you're respecting what people want from you, when you're thinking about the fact that in some ways, the tag management system, the Adobe technologies are an integral part of making sure that consent is properly flowing, not only collecting it, but then making sure it's actioned in all the other technologies. Are there any gotchas? Are there any things that people don't really recognize are happening? And what are the tools that you see as most important in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think from the Adobe perspective, it is that Adobe is still the processor of your data. And so we are not going to provide our customers legal advice, just like we're not in this session. And so you really have to understand what you're collecting, when you need consent. Is it opt-in consent? Is it opt-out consent? Do you have to provide certain preferences based on your jurisdiction? And we're here to partner with you, but our customers are in full control of the tags and when the tags fire. So they have the capability to say, don't load this page unless this consent is provided, so that we don't have a wall created, but at the same time, the customer can make sure that the consents that are important to them are collected before certain page loads happen.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
This is a random. You referenced the you don't have all the letters.
Sure.
I'm just so curious on you guys' perspective. What are the certifications that people like that are most ubiquitous, not necessarily relevant to say just Adobe? I know different tools offer things. So what are people's opinion? And I'm curious.
Are you talking about the tool certification or the person level certification? Okay. So okay.
Level of what I was speaking is.
So from my perspective, when I'm looking at privacy professionals or others I'm engaging with, I am often looking for that International Association of Privacy Professionals certification, whether that's a certified information privacy program manager, whether or not that's that you're certified in U.S. privacy law. Those are the things that we look for, and things that I personally would recommend. It builds your professional portfolio of capabilities, and it demonstrates that you were able to pass a test with a certain level of rigor in order to act as a privacy subject matter expert. International Association of Privacy Professionals, it's actually a professional organization that it's internationally recognized, and I think there's now 6 specific.
Yeah, IAPP.org if you
Yes.
mobile device, type that in. They're fantastic. They actually have a large conference in San Diego next week that some of
Yep.
us will be down for. So
Privacy, security, risk.
They administer all of those different certifications, and they're recognized truly globally. A great organization.
On the nose, is there a telling out the privacy salary and strategies? Yes.
There is somewhat of a, I would say there is a talent gap in privacy, and I'll hand it over to Amy. I do think that the piece that part of the talent gap is a lot of organizations think they need someone who has a JD behind their names in order to operate their privacy program. You do not.
Not a lawyer.
Not a lawyer.
Not a lawyer.
And so I think that in order to close that gap, we need to recognize that a Juris Doctorate is not the only certificate or the only education that is required to be a privacy expert.
And I think, we've been talking about how it's multifunctional as well. You can be a privacy technologist. You can be a privacy lawyer. You can be a privacy operations specialist. You can be the summer intern whose job is to check the privacy mailbox and forward them on to whoever is supposed to be doing, whatever task came into the mailbox. There are so many tasks needed for privacy, and this is one of those areas that is, at least in the US, it's so new that until like the last 2 or 3 years, there hasn't been formal education on this. There's actually, so I'm from Raleigh, and one of the local universities put in place a data privacy law concentration for their law school, which is like the first thing I've ever heard of that is a formal education in data privacy. But everyone else fell into it and had to learn on the job and going to conferences and trying to just figure it out, talking to regulators, not giving away their company name, just really trying to figure out what are we supposed to be doing. But yeah.
And that's the whole point of this event. We want to get people together, cross-function. You're all going to get a chance now. We have got outdoor activities. I don't know whether you're fly fishing or hiking or mountain biking. Talk to people. We didn't want to have a conference that ran from morning to night. We wanted to give you an opportunity to meet people that are working across function. And if I could have one call out, not just for this session today, as we've seen, we've got 3 people with very different perspectives coming from this at all different angles. Think about that within your organization. I've actually talked to Heather about this. It's if you're in the privacy and compliance team, are you coordinating and do you even know who your analytics person is? If you're working in data and analytics, are you pulling in, too rare. Are you pulling in the marketing folks that are like, I'm just throwing a bunch of pixels up there because I want as much data as I can. The theme for all of Edge is bringing together organizations across function so we know how we should be handling these challenges because you can't do it by yourself. They're probably looking at me telling me to get you out of here. We wanted to get you to your events. Thank you for joining. Please give a hand for their panelists, Elizabeth, Rez, and Amy.